Welcome everyone, Scott Teeple, introducing our new Agilify automation Airwaves, where we're going to be bringing you a series of conversations that are going to come from the Global Intelligent Automation Market Report, H2. Hopefully you've taken a look at those, read through all the great materials. In there we talk about the stall points that you potentially will come up against. And today we're going to launch our first conversation around the first stall point, which is the design authority. And today I have Kent Andrews here with us, who's been with the company, I guess, from the beginning. So a lot of good lessons learned as we've kind of gone through it. But more specifically around this design authority, Kent carries a lot of expertise around this space. So I've invited him to have a conversation today. So welcome.
Yeah, Scott, thank you. One thing that we have seen over the last few years when we engage with our clients is definitely that absence of that design authority. You don't really realize you don't have it till you realize you don't have it.
Absolutely.
So, even when we start with our engagements through our academy, we find out very quickly that a lot of times, the intake method, for example, has no type of design. They're receiving emails, which, hey, this is what we want to do. This is the scope of work. Now go off and run with it. Ironically, when we visit with those same customers 6 months later, they're still stuck, in that stall point that you referred to earlier. So
great.
It's a pretty big topic.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. So before we get too far into this, if you wouldn't mind, I think in the report we kind of go and we kind of high level talk about what is design authority, but I don't know that we really get into it. So if you could just share, kind of from an Agilify's perspective, what does design authority mean to us?
Well, it actually is a bigger topic than you think, but it starts. It's very similar to your standard, software development life cycle that we all know from many years past. But it starts with really, and there's many components, but it starts with a standardization. Through not only what your developers do and how they look at code reusage, but also how do they leverage the multiple environments, how are roles set up between those environments, how are they bringing code reusage to their design through the use of standard templates, even down to the documentation that's required to scale the business. And then that's a big feature that most folks forget. They go right to the build, right to the solve.
Yeah.
And they're like, hey.
So, yeah, it's absolutely, and I think that some of the lessons learned that we had, right, was when the developers were actually the ones that were supporting the code base, and you're like, hey, why aren't we moving faster? Why don't we have more things in our pipeline? It's like, oh, it's because I'm too busy supporting this automation and trying to get it mature.
That's a great point. We had an excellent engagement with a client about a year and a half ago. We were working with them over our academy services, and the conversation came up during that engagement that they were like, well, why do you use these templates? And I said, well, how many of your automations do you support? And he goes, well, I support them all. I'm like, well, that in itself is the problem.
Yeah, that is right.
So you're the one that actually developed it. You're actually supporting it. There is no type of code reusage. If you're not available, Kevin, for example, is sitting next to you. It's going to take him quite a bit of time to ramp up. There's no documentation. What happens if the process doesn't work? Mm-hmm. What kind of documentation do we have to go back on and provide the end user that with the manual information that they used to do? Is that person even there and employed anymore? And so when we went back 6 months later, and actually we were asked back because they had stalled out. That here they were with 40 bots. For developers, that may seem a little odd, but they obviously started off a little bit different path. They hadn't made any progress, and so now they were like, hey, we need to understand all those things you were talking about. So those standards or those templates that you were using, can we get a copy of those?
Yeah,
can we talk about
awesome.
how to use those again? Because there's no reuse here. We're supporting everything. We're at capacity within our little organization. We can't scale out.
Yeah, it goes back to another use case, and I think you and I had a lot of conversations around just the overall visibility and how the automations are even developed,
right?
And how quickly you can read through what is actually going on, right? And in traditional development, you've got the coding standards and the spacings and the color codings and everything else.
Right.
Would you mind just talking through some of the importance of just the use of colors?
Well, we use a couple different things on the process pseudo side. I'm referring to Blue Prism, of course. we've developed what we call a standard process template or process standard template that utilizes these colors for various things. And what's nice about it for me is even as an instructor, I can go look at the work that somebody's doing and quickly decipher what is an input, what's an output, what's a variable, what are credential sets, how are these things, how they're labeled, how they're named even, helps, each stage actually having some meaningful detail, things like that. Most of that's skipped over when you're looking at a less developed program with a customer. So we put that into that standard template so that we start from that foundation, if you will. And from there, we build it out to match the documentation that was created during the initial process analysis, which was done by the BAs and so on. So what it does is it allows, Scott, you could take a look at this knowing that standardization and go, okay, I know which queue this is going to. Oh, I see the flow. Yeah, this makes a lot of sense. This is I see my graceful termination here just in case the target applications aren't available. Here's my work items. Now, digging into it, that's obviously part of it. But
absolutely,
from a general idea, you understand and see how this matches the scope.
Absolutely, and then also, the standardize across all your developers and how exceptions are being handled, and understanding, when and how, and there's not, well, in this one it's handled this way, and this one I'm not even sure. So really bringing on some of those.
Yeah, in my mind, and I know we don't have a venue for it here, but in my mind, I can see some designs we've seen, and it's one of the biggest culprits. We're all in a hurry to solve and to provide this value that automation is going to give, but that's just a surface type of look at it. As we go forward and we look at that program yield that I know you'll be talking about in later series, there's a lot of other valuable items that are non-tangible, and as it relates to that support mechanism, that's all money or all value that's coming off of that automation experience. And so the quicker they can resolve those issues, not only there's an associated or customer experience piece, but there's also that productivity and value piece that you're giving away.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think the last kind of major point that we'd like to make here is around kind of the enterprise standards or how the standards are actually created, right? Yeah. If you have more than one or two developers, it's likely you're having a lot of experience from past, or at least more than one individual. How does somebody go about creating what is their design standards?
Well, it really starts with experience. In our case, we've been practitioners for a long time, so we've kind of learned through the school of hard knocks. But it requires a tried and true release management process. You've got to make sure that your environments have segregation. You've got to have an actual defined practice on using credentials from your business users. One thing that we always forget is that audit's looming in the background, right? So we want to start with these standards up front. With complete transparency, so that when they're going to ask us.
They are definitely going to.
What do you mean you provided digital
Absolutely.
workers? So how do they do this job again? Well, it happens to be the same way as the human worker did.
That's right.
We want to make sure we have that ready for them. So, it's through that release management that we have to set those that criteria for us for the standardization. It's through the use of templates. It's through the use of making sure that we're following that process life cycle, not skipping the steps of, what parts of the process can be reutilized from a previous process. As we design forward, if we're in a particular application, are we creating modular objects to be reused and things like that? Or are we looking at the entire solution as one solution, which is not efficient? So all that is part of that.
Yeah. And I think that through our practitioner and our lessons learned, I know that in our other cafes that we've talked about how we kind of paused our program. We as we were working really hard with a couple of the clients, we was like, hey, wait a minute, maybe we're not doing some things maybe the most strategic way or scalable way, and I think this is one of the major stall points that individuals will have as you're really growing out your automation program. So I think that as you're really looking to grow and scale, I think this is one of the first places to really stop and think about. Is there any other specific use case that you can think of that really brings in the importance of the design authority role? Well,
it's kind of related to this, but another use case that I can think of too is there are a lot of integrators out there. There's a lot of different options for who you bring in as a partner. They themselves may not have a clear understanding of what design authority looks like, and we have run into that ourselves a few times. We will engage with a client maybe 6 months post an engagement with another integrator, and it becomes clear that integrator, though providing the specific service of developing, really didn't have a clear handle on that design authority piece. Unfortunately, when that handoff is given back to the client, they're starting from scratch again. Or we're seeing that work, once they pull back the black curtain.
Oh, that's awesome.
They're like, I have no idea what I'm looking at.
Yeah.
Or the substandard, just development and things like that. That should be caught during that release management process. That should be caught during any kind of peer reviews that would happen within the developers. Unfortunately, in this case, it happened 6 months and hundreds of thousands of dollars of consulting time later. And so it's something you want to look at up front.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think that the systems integrator is really focused on the COE first, and kind of just trying to get through some kind of automation, but not necessarily tackling the way that automations are actually created and built, and getting the customer really knowledgeable within this space to really take it on to take it to the next stall point. What you get to is the effective
absolutely
the effective execution piece.
Certainly.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, I really appreciate you coming in today and sharing some of the lessons learned. So if you haven't read the Global Intelligent Automation Market Report, please go ahead and download that. You can find that on the SSON website. And I believe that we probably have a link on our webpage, agilifyautomation.com. And while you're out there, we have an automation maturity survey that will help you identify where you are in your overall automation journey, and give you some nice touch points, and maybe some helpful tips on where to go next in your automation program.